Hey, everybody. If this setting looks familiar, it's because I'm trying to do a couple of videos in one day and then get them posted just because I got behind. This one is going to go up after my Led Zeppelin ranking video. Hope you all enjoyed that. I look forward to reading what all the comments are. Um, so, it's interesting to look back in terms of decades or even half decades. And so I'm going to do albums that are 40, 45, 50 years old this year and give you my top 10 from that year. So I'm going to start with the 40. I'm going to start with 1983. I have a fairly, I'm putting my list here. I have a fairly eclectic set. Um, I looked in my collection and I realized I don't have a ton of albums from 1983. I actually have 9 to show. I hate doing videos without props, but one I only have on CD, and all my CDs are still in storage. It's been a few months, haven't been able to get them back out, but I have all my vinyl records, so I thought 9 out of 10 is close enough. I hope you won't be too upset over that. Still sipping on the World Market Mocha Java blend. I love World Market coffee, and it's for the price, it's fantastic. It's really good coffee anyway. All right, so these are in no particular order as far as because these are all favorites by some artists that I really enjoy. So we're going to start with sort of the country folk Americana. I mentioned this in my favorite Willie Nelson albums. My top, I think I did a dozen. Tougher Than Leather. Willie produced this one at his own studio in Luck, Texas at Pedernelli's. Had his road band. This is a concept album, and this could really be the sequel to Red-Headed Stranger. Um, so it's got My Love for the Rose, Changing Skies, Tougher Than Leather, Little Old Fashioned Karma, Somewhere in Texas Part 1, really fun rendition of Beer Barrel Polka, Summer of Roses, which he originally did on his Yesterday's Wine album in 71, which was also a concept record. Somewhere in Texas Part 2, My Love for the Rose, The Convict and the Rose, Changing Skies, I Am the Forest, and Nobody Slides, my friend. Um, yeah, and so it's got kind of an illustration, sort of takes you through it, similar to Red-Headed Stranger. I don't know if that was his intention, probably. Um, Willie got away from the overproduced pop stuff that he was doing at the time, which, a lot of people love, and I just cannot wrap my head around for some reason. I'm not a big fan of the Chips Moman production of the late 70s, early 80s. So Willie producing this himself, his road band playing one of the great unheralded outlaw country records. Uh, a lot, I'd say along those lines, this is just a great unheralded Americana, Texas music record, but Bloodlines by Terry Allen from 1983. Um, you know, get that, and then, um, kind of real. Terry Allen, I've talked about his stuff here before. I actually mentioned this talking about his reissues from last year. Um, yeah, this was, it opens with a sort of I don't even know what to call it, a lament, a hymn called Bloodlines. And then one of the funniest songs I've ever heard, one of the greatest satirical songs, Give Me a Ride to Heaven, Boy. He revisits his Juarez record with Cantina Carlotta. There's a song called Our Land, which is about the Irish struggles. Oh Hallelujah, which is a sort of a gospel song. Oh What a Dangerous Life, Manhattan Bluebird. Then there's just a thriving rendition of There Ought to Be a Law Against Sunny Southern California from the Juarez album, and it takes the original and really amps it up. It sounds like there were no alcohol or substances at all in this one. None. Uh, and then it closes with the song Bloodlines, but there's a Bloodlines chorus, and some of the great Texas musicians of all time are on here. Davis McClarty on drums, Richard Bowden on fiddle, and then the great guitarist pedal steel player Lloyd Maines is on here. And Lloyd's very young daughter, Natalie Maines, at age 9, made her vocal debut as part of the Bloodlines chorus. She, of course, would go on to be the most famous singer of the Dixie Chicks, now just called the Chicks. So anyway, that's kind of a funny historical reference. This is one of the great singer-songwriter Americana records of all time. Terry Allen, author, playwright, visual artist, sculptor, musician, just all around Renaissance man. And God bless him, he's still going. Um, yeah, so here's the fantastic record from 1983. Staying in Texas, but completely the opposite, is the debut record from Stevie Ray Vaughan and Double Trouble, Texas Flood. Love Struck Baby, Pride and Joy, Texas Flood, Tell Me, Testify, Rude Mood, Mary Had a Little Lamb, Dirty Pool, I'm Crying, and Lenny. And here they are on the back with John Hammond Sr., the great A&R talent agent for Columbia Records. Stevie Ray Vaughan, of course, was well known in the blues scene by the time he even recorded this. And this is a fully formed band and record. And the first two SRV records, to me, are the best. The playing on here is second to none. Chris Layton and Tommy Shannon are just, phenomenal on here, too. So it really was a band effort, but of course, Stevie stood out. So anyway, one of my favorites from 1983, Stevie Ray Vaughan and Double Trouble, Texas Flood. Another sort of unheralded album from that year is Infidels by Bob Dylan. He was coming off his religious music, and it's still a little bit of overtone here. This was produced by Mark Knopfler of Dire Straits. Mick Taylor, formerly of the Stones, plays on here. Joker Man, Sweetheart Like You, Neighborhood Bully, License to Kill is just, oh, what a beautiful song that is. I mean, it's not a happy song, but it's one of Dylan's most well-written, in my top 10 Dylan songs. Man of Peace, Union Sundown, I and I, another probably my top 10 Dylan songs, and then Don't Fall Apart on Me Tonight. His voice was still really strong here. The production is a little more than it's an 80s production, but the songs are so strong. Dylan's lyrics were getting back to being as sharp as ever. Infidels by Bob Dylan is one of my favorites from 1983. Oh, this way, if you'd asked me a couple of years ago about this one, I wouldn't have mentioned it anywhere in a favorites list of anything. But last year, my friend John from the record store here in town, Off the Record, we'd been talking. He kind of convinced me to give this album another chance, and I hadn't listened to it in over 20 years. And, with age comes perspective, and it's the Final Cut by Pink Floyd. Really a Roger Waters solo album that had David Gilmour and Nick Mason play on it. Rick Wright, I believe, was fired during this time. He still plays on here a little bit. Maybe. You know what? No, it doesn't look like he even did. And so Floyd was basically falling apart. They'd done The Wall, which was exhausting. And that was, Roger Waters assuming control of the band for sure. This is Roger. Really, the Final Cut, A Requiem for the Post-War Dream by Roger Waters, performed by Pink Floyd. And so, yeah, this is a very dark record. I mean, if you thought some of The Wall was dark, Townes Van Zandt could have written some of this. Get Your Filthy Hands Off My Dessert, The Fletcher Memorial Home, Southampton Dock, The Final Cut, Not Now, John, Two Sons in the Sunset. Sorry, that was side 2. The Post-War Dream, Your Possible Pasts, One of the Few, The Hero's Return, The Gunner's Dream, and Paranoid Eyes. You know what? I gave this a listen with an open mind and new perspective, and this is not my favorite Floyd record, but I gotta tell you, I enjoy this a lot more than I do the more mainstream stuff. There's a lot of depth to this record that I wouldn't have recognized. I didn't recognize when I was younger. And so I'm glad I gave it a chance. So in my top 10 for 1983, believe it or not, very hard for me to believe, The Final Cut by Pink Floyd. The rest is a lot of hard rock. I'm going to mention it here real quick. It's the one I don't have the props for. It's Born Again by Black Sabbath. It's got that horrendous cartoon on it, a painting of a screaming demon child or something. The band hated the cover, they hated the mix, but yet, man, that album. So it was Tony Iommi on guitar and Geezer Butler on bass, the two founding members. Bill Ward came back on drums for that, founding drummer, and Ian Gillan of Deep Purple. on paper, maybe it shouldn't have worked. It was derided in the press as Deep Sabbath or, whatever. You know what? It's the best Ian Gillan ever sounded, in my opinion. It was his last truly great vocal performance. It was recorded at an old castle or an old house or something like that. I can't remember the exact details. But, it was sort of weird the way it was recorded. The band came together over a drunken night at a pub between Iommi and Butler and Ian Gillan. And when he woke up the next morning, he was in Black Sabbath. They only did the one album, the one tour, and it's a shame because songs like Disturbing the Priest and Digital Bitch and Keep It Warm, Hotline are just among the band's best, really. So check out Born Again by Black Sabbath. The debut album from Metallica is also in here. Kill 'Em All. This is maybe still my favorite Metallica record. It's them at their thrashiest, at their most raw. Hit the Lights, The Four Horsemen is maybe my favorite Metallica song. Motor Breath, Jump in the Fire, Anesthesia Pulling Teeth is a bass solo by the late great Cliff Burton. Whiplash, Phantom Lord, No Remorse is just brutal. Seek and Destroy, and Metal Militia. And it's just, how fast can you play? How hard can you play? But there's, this was the lineup of Hetfield, Lars Ulrich, Cliff Burton, and Kirk Hammett. They would get more musically diverse by the next album. And, the next two records were fantastic. But this, man, for a debut album right out of the gate, these guys were young and fired up and ready to prove themselves to the world. And this is a killer record. One of my two favorite AC/DC records, Flick of the Switch. This is another one similar to Willie Nelson, where they got rid of Mutt Lange and the overproduced sound of the late 70s, early 80s, and the band reassumed control. And this is just a pure hard rock record. There's nothing flashy or fancy about it. There's no real hit single per se. Guns for Hire was kind of one at the time. And that's a great song. I love that song. I love this album. This is my favorite Brian Johnson era AC/DC record. Rising Power, This House is on Fire, Flick of the Switch, Nervous, Shakedown, Landslide, Guns for Hire, Deep in the Hole, Bedlam in Belgium, and then this nasty blues slide guitar song, Badlands, and then it ends with a thundering brain shake. Brian Johnson's dad said, man, he was at the Battle of Monte Cassino, and that wasn't even as loud as AC/DC were in concert, and they really channeled their live sound on this. And it's an oft-overlooked album. It does not get the credit it deserves, and this is one of my favorite AC/DC records, as well as one of my favorites from 1983, turning 40 years old this year. Another one-off collaboration, one of my top favorite Motorhead records, if you've watched that video, Another Perfect Day. Fast Eddie Clarke left the band rather unceremoniously. Was either fired or quit or whatever. And they brought in Brian Robertson from Thin Lizzy. So they brought in a feisty, red-haired Scottish guitar player. And Brian's playing was a lot more melodic and diverse than what Motorhead fans were used to. But yet this is one heavy, heavy album. It opens with Back at the Funny Farm. Shine rocks. Dancing on Your Grave is very melodic and heavy. Rocket is just pure Motorhead. One Track Mind, the title track, Another Perfect Day. Marching Off to War is brutal. I Got Mine, Tales of Glory, and Die You Bastard. And you can see the back here. It's really too bad that this lineup only lasted one album, because the musical depth that Brian Robertson brought, the tone to the music. But Brian Lemmy said he acted like a special guest artiste. He would wear, ballet slippers and silk shorts on stage in front of Hell's Angels. He wouldn't play Overkill or Ace of Spades or a bunch of their well-known hits. He wanted to play stuff off here. And I get it, trying to prove yourself as the new guy, but man, he alienated the fan base. The fan club numbers dropped at the time. So he's kind of his own worst enemy, and, they parted ways. But yet this album has, again, it's another one that's just grown in stature over the years. And if you don't know this one, do yourself a favor and check it out. Another Perfect Day by Motorhead. And then the last one, another game-changing record. I was going to try and give some fancy introduction, but Holy Diver by Dio. This is my OG pressing of it. A good friend of mine, Paul, gave me the 12-inch Rainbow in the Dark single, and then Stand Up and Shout, Straight Through the Heart, recorded live at Donington 83. You can see the Dio band there. Of course, when Dio split from Black Sabbath, he took drummer Vinny Appice with him. They formed a Dio band. This is last year's remix and reissue. The remix by Joe Barresi. Listen to these songs, right? Stand Up and Shout, Holy Diver, Gypsy, Caught in the Middle, Don't Talk to Strangers, Straight Through the Heart, Invisible, Rainbow in the Dark, Shame on the Night, and a bonus track of Evil Eyes, which was not available on the original. It was a B-side, I think, to Rainbow in the Dark, but I can't quite remember. Or to Stand Up and Shout, sorry, Rainbow in the Dark was the 12-inch I just mentioned. So it's got different cover art. This was, if you watched my video for my favorite albums of 2022, this was amongst my favorite reissues. So, they created new cover art for it along the lines of the original, to differentiate between the remix and the just plain remasters. This one has more guitar, more drums. You actually hear the songs start, you hear the counting off, you hear the songs end. I don't remember if there's no fade outs, but there are hardly any fade outs. If you're going to get a Dio record, this is it. I mean, and Ronnie really considered this one of the true pinnacles of his career. I mean, he'd already recorded with Rainbow. He'd already recorded with Black Sabbath. And to think he was 41 years old when this came out, I'm thinking, man, I'm 41 now making this video, and what the heck do I have to show for it, But he never gave up. He persevered. He was this small man with the large voice. So this is, I said there's no particular order, but I saved this one for last. This is, especially this mix of it. It's a really special album. Dio Holy Diver. Turns 40 years old this year, 1983. So that's my top 10 for that year. And again, I told you it's really diverse. I don't have a whole lot from 1983, but the ones I do are all excellent records, and I suggest it. Let me know your top 10, top 5, top 20, whatever. I would love to hear from you. I look forward to discussing things with you. And as always, take care, everybody, and thank you for your kind attention.